It was a Tuesday afternoon just after 4, when my daughter called me crying from the side of a road 300 miles away. Except it wasn't my daughter. I know that now. At the time, I knew nothing except the sound of her voice, and I want to be honest about how completely that sound undid me, because I think the honesty is the only useful part of this story. Her name is Emma. She's 19, in her second year at university, and the last real conversation we'd had was 2 days earlier, about whether she needed money for textbooks. So when my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize and I answered, and I heard her voice, her exact voice, the small catch she gets when she's been crying, the way she softens the D when she says, "Dad." I did not think for 1 second that it might not be her. She said there had been an accident. She said it was her fault, that she'd been driving a friend's car and had hit someone, and that there was a man with her now, a lawyer, who could help, but she needed money first, right away, before the police made it worse. She was crying so hard I could barely make out the words. And then the man took the phone. He was calm, professional. He gave a name and a firm I didn't quite catch. He said Emma was not hurt, but was very frightened, that the situation was time-sensitive and that if I could transfer a retainer immediately, he could keep this from becoming a criminal matter. He gave me an account number. He stayed on the line while I opened my banking app with shaking hands. I want to tell you I saw through it. I didn't. I had the transfer screen open. I had typed in the amount, £4,000, most of what was in that account, and my thumb was over the button. What stopped me was small. It was the man saying, "Your daughter, Emma, one too many times." People who know you don't keep saying your name. He used hers in almost every sentence, the way you do when you're reading from a script and want it to sound personal. Something in me went cold and still. I said, "Put Emma back on. Ask her what we talked about on Sunday." There was a pause. A real pause, a few seconds of dead air, and then the line went dead. I called Emma's actual number. She picked up on the second ring, bored, in her room, halfway through a sentence to her flatmate. She'd been there all afternoon. There was no accident, there was no car, there was no man. I sat down on my kitchen floor and shook for about 10 minutes. That should have been the end of it. A scam, a near miss, a story to tell at dinner. Be careful. These people are good now. They almost got me. I reported it to the bank's fraud line and to the police non-emergency number, and the officer I spoke to was kind and entirely unsurprised. She told me these calls were happening constantly now, that the technology to clone a voice needed only a few seconds of audio, that they pull it from videos people post, from voicemail greetings, from anywhere at all. A few seconds of audio, that's the part I couldn't let go of, because the voice hadn't been generic. It hadn't been a rough approximation that I'd filled in with panic. It had been Emma crying. Specifically crying. And Emma is a private person. She doesn't post videos of herself. She barely uses social media. She finds the whole thing embarrassing. I went through her public accounts that night, what little there was. A handful of photos, no videos, no audio. Nothing you could clone a voice from, let alone a voice mid-sob. So, where had they gotten it? I called her back the next morning and asked, carefully, not wanting to frighten her, whether she'd had any strange calls. Silent calls, wrong numbers, anything. She thought about it and said yes, actually. Over the past couple of months, she'd had a few calls where she'd answer, and there'd be nothing on the line, just a faint sound, and then they'd hang up. She'd assumed it was a bad connection. She'd answered each one, said hello 2 or 3 times, gotten more irritated each time. Hello? Hello? Is anyone there? I thought about what a voice sounds like when it's getting annoyed, when it's confused. When you call someone late at night and they pick up half asleep and a little frightened and say hello, what does that sound like? It sounds like the raw material of crying. They hadn't taken her voice from a video. They had called her, over and over, across weeks, and recorded her saying hello in every emotional register a person has. Calm, irritated, sleepy, alarmed. They had assembled her, one short call at a time, and they had been patient about it. I gave all of this to the police. I was lucky, in a way. The case was eventually passed to a detective I'd been referred to through a friend, a woman named Reyes who specialized in this kind of thing and who listened to the whole account without once making me feel foolish. She told me the patience was the part that mattered. Most of these operations, she said, are about volume. They call 10,000 numbers. They use a generic, panicked voice. They catch the small percentage who fall for it. Fast and wide and shallow. What had happened to us was none of those things. Someone had selected Emma specifically, had gotten her number, called her dozens of times to harvest her voice, then identified me as her father and called me with an emergency built around the one fear that would override my judgment. That isn't volume. That's a person who knew our names, our relationship, and exactly where to push. Reyes asked me the question I'd been avoiding. How would someone get Emma's number, know she had a father, know how to reach him, and know enough to build the story they built? I didn't have an answer. Emma didn't either. We went through everyone, every app she'd given her number to, every form she'd filled in, every person who'd ever had her phone. Nothing obvious. Reyes said it rarely is obvious. She said data brokers sell packages, names, numbers, family connections, addresses, assembled from breaches and public records and ordinary purchases, and that for a small amount of money almost anyone can buy a fairly complete picture of a stranger's life. The family connection, the 2 phone numbers, the fact that we were close enough that I would panic, all of that could be bought. The voice was the only part they had to gather themselves. So that's what they did. They bought the map and harvested the voice. The case is still open, technically, which Reyes told me honestly means it is closed in every way that matters. They never identified who made the calls. The account I almost paid into was a mule account, emptied and abandoned within a day of being flagged. There was nothing left to follow. What I'm left with is the call log. Not the scam call. I never recorded that. The silent calls Emma got. She'd never cleared her log, and there they were, going back 9 weeks. 11 calls. Each one 20 or 30 seconds long. Each one her saying hello into a silence that was listening very carefully. I've thought about the person on the other end of those calls, sitting somewhere with headphones on, saying nothing, letting my daughter talk into the dark, collecting her. Not because they wanted to hurt her exactly, because she was a component, a voice to be acquired, used, and set aside. I find that the worst part, honestly, not malice, but the lack of it, the sheer flat efficiency of it. Here's what I want you to take from this, practically, because I always feel I should leave people with something they can actually use. Agree on a word with the people you love. A real word, an ordinary one, that would never come up in a scripted emergency. If someone calls claiming to be your child, your parent, your partner, in crisis and demanding money now, you ask for the word. No legitimate emergency is ever ruined by taking 30 seconds to confirm who you're talking to. The scam depends entirely on speed and fear. A pause is the one thing it cannot survive, and if you get silent calls, the kind where you say hello into nothing and they hang up, don't keep talking. Hang up first. I know that sounds like nothing. I know how small it is. But I think about those 11 calls. I think about how my daughter built the recording herself, word by word, hello by hello, helping them without ever knowing she was helping. And I think the smallest thing I can ask of you is this. When you answer the phone and no one is there, don't fill the silence. Just hang up. Don't give them your voice.